We must value ourselves enough to give the gift of self-care. Self-care is health mentally, emotionally, and physically. It can exude love, balance, and self-love in a household.
Hey there, mamas. Welcome to the Mom Care Coach podcast. And I am your host, Victoria Mattia. I am a certified life and health coach, certified international counselor, and also a homeschooling autism mom and former autism clinic director. I know that you are struggling with holding healthy boundaries around time management, constantly getting less than adequate sleep, and managing deep exhaustion and overwhelm. And you are praying to find a way to have more energy throughout your day. Well, friend, you have come to the right place. In this show, we will talk about how you can guide yourself through a process of self-care strategies that will lead you to the health solutions that you as an autism mom have been searching for, and how providing for your 4 intentional needs, sleep, movement, nutrition, and mindset, can help you avoid burnout. So grab this morning's leftover matcha or pour another cup of your homemade kombucha and pull up a chair, and let's have a chat on how these health solutions can change your life. One more thing. Would you like to know more about the online coaching services and health bundles that I offer? If so, please do not hesitate to reach out. My email is mindfulwellnessforautismmoms@gmail.com. Again, mindfulwellnessforautismmoms@gmail.com. And of course, it's also listed in the show notes. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you. Now on with our show. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Victoria Mattia. And what I like to start out with is our one big idea. So this is episode 2, and the name of this episode is Why Did I Create a Self-Care Podcast for Autism Moms? Okay, so I am the Mom Care Coach, and we are actually starting on a 3-episode series. And today we're going to answer a why question. We have a why, we have a how, and we have a what. Okay, so we're answering our why question. Why did I create a self-care podcast for autism moms? And our one big idea is you must give yourself permission to care for yourself. Again, you must give yourself permission to care for yourself. You know, it's so funny because that sounds so simple, doesn't it? But it's not. I have to admit, in my journey as an autism mom, it is not. And I also want to tell you that I use the term autism mom, meaning that I'm referring to mothers of children with autism, right? So I use that in a fluid sense. So I use either one at different times, but I just want you to know that that's what I am referring to. So let's get down to business and kind of really talk about this journey, this process that I have found. So this is something that I'm really passionate about, this topic, because I found that it was a missing piece for me in my autism mama journey. And I think it is that way for a lot of moms. So on this show, it's really important for the focus and my viewpoint and how I envisioned to have the focus to be on the mother and caring for the mother. And I will tell you why. So I remember when my oldest son, I have 2 sons, my oldest son was diagnosed with autism. And I remember we went to his developmental pediatrician. He was on a waiting list for, I think it was a year or 2. I think it was just a year actually, which if you know that that is very, very common. And actually a little bit short because sometimes it can be 2 and 3 years for the waiting list. But it was just a year, or perhaps even a little shy of a year. And when he received his diagnosis, it was the pediatrician coming to me and saying, yes, it is as you thought. He is on the spectrum. He is moderate.
He is a level 2, and it was not shocking to me, but in my mind I had this, vision of, okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to hire all the therapists that we need to hire. He's going to go to all the classes. We are going to get him enrolled in ABA and, in-home ABA, in-center ABA, along with speech pathology, OT, PT, and then alternative therapies as well. And so that is exactly what I did. And a little bit of background on me is that I was an autism clinic director. So I met with many different families that have children on the autism spectrum. And what I found was it usually was not a surprise for a lot of these families. They knew. However, what the surprise was is how it really affected them as a family and their interactions and how they struggled with self-care. Often, the families didn't know that it was self-care that was the issue. They thought it was something else. Sometimes a mom would say, oh, I need to work out more. Oh, I need to be more on time. I need to focus more on time management. Sometimes they thought it was maybe an issue with their partner or with other family members. But it took a while to identify it as being self-care. So actually, I want to read to you the Google definition of self-care because I thought it was very interesting and very poignant. Self-care is the practice of taking care of yourself, physically, mentally, and emotionally. This is referring to our health. And it can include habits, practices, style choices, and it can promote, let me do that again. Lifestyle choices, and it can promote and maintain your health, prevent disease, and cope with illness. So this is Google's definition. We are going to focus on that first portion where it says self-care is the practice of taking care of your physical, mental, and emotional health. And I am going to take that a step further. It also has to do with maintaining boundaries for your own emotional health. It also has to do with daily self-care. What are the things that you need to do to feel safe in your body? What are the things that you need to nourish your body? All the different facets of caring for the self. And in this show, we're focusing on caring for the mother. And the reason why, I know that it's so important that fathers take care of themselves as well. And sometimes the father can be the primary caregiver, but mostly worldwide, women are the primary caregivers. And honestly, when I would speak to a lot of families, I predominantly spoke with the moms because they were the ones that were bringing the children in the clinic that I worked in. They often struggled with a lot of health conditions over time. In our center, we saw kiddos that were from 2 years old to 17 years old. And often it was those middle years that moms were really struggling. And going back to my personal story, I remember focusing so much attention on my children that I kind of put myself on the back burner. I knew I needed to take care of myself, but I didn't really know how to make that fit in our current season of life. At the time, I was working outside of the home. Currently, I am a homeschooling mom, and that is also different. And so I want to really just focus on 4 areas that make such a huge difference. Because when doctors are giving that diagnosis, and I have found it to be universal, whether you go to a developmental pediatrician, a neurologist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, all of the ones that are legally capable of giving that diagnosis, I have never seen a time where the doctor turns to the mother and say, okay, now this is what you need to do to care for yourself so you do not get compassion fatigue, so you do not burn out, so you do not have different physical, mental, or emotional struggles. These are the list of things that you need to do to care for yourself. I've never actually seen that. And so the issue is, often we're given this diagnosis and we go, doing literally everything possible to care for our children because we love for our children. And especially if you have more than one kiddo, it can be challenging, even more challenging. And if we're just going, and we're not taking care of ourselves, over time, we can start to have little issues that can turn into big issues, all because we did not practice that daily self-care of feeling safe in our body emotionally and taking care of our physical body, as well as taking care of our mental body. And so that's what we're really going to focus in on this show. So what are the things we're going to focus in on this particular episode? I have a couple of ideas that I really want to mention. One of the things that was really important to me if I was going to create a podcast is that I wanted to create a community, an experience for people to listen in and understand and feel like they can relate to me and understand that they're not alone. Because that is just so important and pivotal. So when I was preparing for this show, I asked a lot of my community of other autism moms on Instagram and Facebook, and I asked them what were the things that they were struggling with the most. And what I continued to keep hearing was stress management, really having difficulty taking care of the self, with different tips when it came to stress that they really felt like they needed, but they didn't know how to access. Another thing was difficulty, of course, getting enough sleep, which, is very common to Autism Mom world. And another issue was creating your day with self-care within it, knowing what to do at different times of the day so that you could really flourish. Okay. So that's what I kept hearing. And it was really interesting to me because that's exactly what I've experienced as well. I totally understand that. Recently, I read an article in Disability Scoop. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it is an online news organization that covers all things developmental disabilities. And they mention in the article that there was a journal study that was conducted back in 2009. And they took a group of autism moms who had children on the spectrum, and they were ages adolescent to adult age. And they gave them some different testing. And they noticed that these moms, they tested very, very high in the stress area, the stress management area. It was so high that they were considered to have the same amount of stress as soldiers that have seen combat. I thought that was so pivotal. And I had some questions that the article didn't answer, but I started to ask myself questions. I started to wonder, what if these moms had had self-care practices put in place when their children were younger? Would they have tested so high in the area of stress? So I think I said stress management. It was not actually stress management. They were testing their stress levels to see how high they were. And it was very similar to soldiers that had seen combat. And I was not surprised. But what I thought was interesting was that they decided to test these mothers. The reason why I found that to be interesting is because there's often so much emphasis put on our children, as it should be. But I also feel that it would be even more important and even more pivotal, even for the information to actually not just have a preference for our children, but as the family unit as a whole. For several reasons. One reason is that there is a high incidence of divorce among families where children have disabilities. And then also, it would be so important to have a focus on self-care for the family unit alongside the the importance that we place on therapies, OT, PT, ABA, alternative therapies that we offer for our children, which is 100% necessary, especially when we are working with them to help them meet the milestones, whether a family has chosen to have in-center ABA, in-home ABA, or other forms of therapies, or if the parent is chosen to focus just on brain balance techniques in the home. I think it would be really important to focus on that family unit. And so I applaud this particular article in Disability Scoop to do that work in helping families and helping specifically mothers and testing them to see that stress level. And again, I was not surprised, but I think it brings us back to the point as I started. The point is to have self-care for mothers so we can avoid compassion fatigue and burnout, and so that we will have the emotional, mental, and physical resilience that we need so that we can be caregivers for our children, our families, and to show up as our best self, especially as we age, so that we can feel really good in our body and in our skin. Okay. So, number one, I want this podcast to help people understand that they're not alone, which is the first thing I mentioned. The second thing is I want you to be able to give yourself permission to take care of yourself, just like we give our children permission to develop in the way that they need to, at the rate that they need to, in the time that they need to become the person that they are supposed to be, right? We always give our children that permission, but we forget to give ourselves that permission. So I think that that's really important. And so on this show, we're going to start in these certain areas. So we have 4 different areas we're going to start in. It's going to either be sleep, nutrition, mindset, or movement. Okay, so this particular episode, we're really focusing on mindset because I want you to be able to give yourself permission, validate yourself, understand that you are important. You may not need to be the top number 1 on your list of to-dos, but you do need to be on that list. And that is what I had to learn the hard way. As I said, my son, he was diagnosed, I don't know if I mentioned, he was diagnosed at 6 years old. I have another child about the time of when he was around 8 years old. I really struggled with my self-care because I was doing so many things and working so much and helping everybody do all of the things that they needed to do. I unfortunately did not prioritize my own health, and I started to have different struggles. I started to struggle with a little bit of anxiety. I started to struggle with overwhelm. I started to struggle with having times of not eating, and then to compensate, I would drink too much caffeine. I had little things that I started to do that was not healthy for me, and I started to not feel my best self. Okay, so I want to help you avoid that. And I remember seeing that when all of the families that would come to my clinic. And I have met other moms that had significant struggles with their health because they did not practice self-care at the beginning of their Autism Mom journey. I have to say that the Autism Mom journey is very intense, but it's really beautiful because it focuses so much attention on our child that we are forced to focus attention on ourselves as well. And I think that that is so powerful that we can actually be encouraging ourselves and helping ourselves alongside our child. And I think that that is a beautiful process. Now, I will say that it has taken me a while to get there because it can be really intense. Okay, so let's pick apart these different 4 areas that we can focus on to start to help our bodies. Because I do feel that when we take small steps, it can add up to something really big, especially if you're at a time in your life and you're feeling really overwhelmed and you may be feeling like, wow, I'm already really overwhelmed. You're telling me to start to take new strides in a different direction. I want to take a little bit of that overwhelm away. So let's look at the little changes that we can make in our daily lives. So one of the areas is sleep. Okay, so I am not going to tackle all the different difficulties with sleep in this particular episode. I know that so many children on the autism spectrum really struggle with sleep, and therefore their parents often struggle with sleep. And unfortunately, after you have struggled with sleep for a long period of time, what can happen is your body can get used to that and it can have difficulty either going to sleep or staying asleep for a multitude of reasons. So let's look at the little things, the little changes that we can make in our lives today to help with our sleep. Okay, so we can decrease the blue light. Okay, so the blue light is coming from our laptops, is coming from our cell phones. There's a few different things we can do. We can go into our settings and decrease that blue light. We can start to have more red light at certain times of the day. We can turn our phones and laptops off 2 to 3 hours before it's time for us to go to sleep. That is optimum. But I understand that it is difficult. But if that is something you're wanting to move forward with, that can be very helpful, okay? So, and I will have some upcoming podcast episodes that's going to really take a deep dive into sleep and all the different things we can do. Okay, also not having laptops and phones in our bedrooms when it is time for us to sleep. Other simple things we can do. We can make sure that we are having comfy pajamas on when it's time to sleep, comfy sheets when it's time to sleep, taking a bath before it's time for us to get to sleep is very, very helpful. Lowering the lights, having low lights in the house like an hour before it's time to sleep, like getting some Himalayan salt lamps. That's really helpful because it is conditioning our body and kind of signaling to our body rather that guess what? It's time for us to sleep, and we're wanting to start to slow things down, and we're wanting to be able to have our bodies relax enough to be able to get in that mindset. A lot of times it can be tricky because if you're like me, you may struggle with a little bit of chatter right before it's time to sleep, but I have found a few different things to help. All of the things I'm mentioning to you, as well as maybe like some herbal tea. There's some relaxing herbs that can help with that. That's what I do personally. And there's different kinds of supplements that can help with that, that will just help our minds to start to calm down and to get into that mindset of guess what, we're going to bed now. So again, I just want to reiterate, no phone or laptop in the bedroom is really important. And if possible, not having the TV on, if you have one in your bedroom, on as well, like not having that on is also very helpful. And then even with all of these things, the number one thing I think is so important is consistency, okay? So the next thing we want to talk about is nutrition. So meal planning can be very, very helpful. If you are a person that just gets overwhelmed with the same thing that they're eating every day, that can be a little boring for you, there's little tips so we can work on that. Also, little plug, I do have some more upcoming episodes, and we're going to talk about meal planning as well. But what I have found to kind of switch things up, because I have one kiddo that does not mind having literally the same thing every day, and another kiddo that doesn't want anything that is the same from day to day, unless rice. He really likes rice. But so this is what I do. I will batch like my proteins and my veggies and carbs, and then I can kind of switch things up with the different spices I have, or maybe the different kinds of carbs. Let's see, the different kinds of grains that I will make, and so it can feel like a different kind of meal. So for instance, if you are a meat eater, I personally am a vegan, but my kiddos are not. They are plant-based, but they're probably more like a plant-based paleo kind of thing. So maybe I will batch some grass-fed beef, and then I will batch maybe some lamb, maybe some chicken. And even though we're having either quinoa or rice every day, then I can kind of switch that up. And I can think about what kind of veggies I'm going to use, what kind of fruits I'm going to use, and that's my meal planning. And it can feel like they're completely different meals because I'm using different spices and I'm using different proteins. So that can really affect it. Okay, so that's just an example. Another thing that we can think of is if we just batch those different things a couple times a week, maybe not for the entire week, not the full 7 days, but if we have enough batch for 3 days and 4 days, that can be very helpful if you're wanting to get started in meal planning, like that whole meal planning 101. But it can be overwhelming to think that I have to batch all huge portions at one time. I have found that was really, really helpful for me. Okay, so we have covered nutrition, we have covered sleep. Let's go into mindset. So mindset is so incredibly important. I love talking about mindset. And the reason why I love talking about it is because you can do everything perfect, but if you have I don't want to say the wrong mindset, but a negative mindset, well, it can bleed over into every area of your life. So when it comes to mindset, we want to be aware, be really cognizant of our thoughts. So if you are a person that tends to be more negative, or if you're more positive, you want to be aware of that. And then you also want to notice when you may start to feel negative. Okay, so if you are a person that you must eat at a certain time every day, or you get kind of hangry, that is something you kind of want to notice. If you are a person that struggles with being negative when you start to feel anxious, that is also something that you want to notice. I remember, I think it was a year ago, I think I posted a couple of YouTube videos on my Instagram as I was kind of working through anxious thoughts, issues with anxiety that I never really had, but it was something that I was kind of starting to deal with, and I was sharing just some little tips of what had been helping me. And so really focusing on having the right mindset, reading books that like personal development books, self-development books are really, really helpful when it comes to mindset. And also journaling is something I have really enjoyed doing, and just being mindful that, it takes time for change, and that's okay. We can start focusing on different practices that can help us, like breath work, exercise, and that can move us right into our next thing that we kind of want to talk about, our next pillar, which is movement. Movement is so amazing. I call it movement, but it can be, you may think of it as fitness or exercise. But basically, moving your body. What do you enjoy doing to move your body? That could be sports, it could be Pilates, it could be, there's so many different areas. Even hula hooping can be really good form of movement when it's done consistently, which will help with sleep, digestion, mood regulation, energy production, having sustained energy. All of these things are really, really helpful, and it can really help just all the different areas of your life. But I do know that that can be challenging, because everything is challenging when you're trying to make a change in your life. And so here's my suggestion. You can pick 2 or 3 of these things and just practice. Maybe start thinking about what your favorite kind of movement is. Start thinking about, if you were to meal plan, what kind of proteins would you like to batch? Or what kind of grains, if you are a grain eater? If you're not, what kind of veggies would you want to have on hand in your fridge at all times? Just starting to kind of allow your mind to think that way. It can be really helpful, because there's a saying, let me think, I want to get it right. The saying is, energy goes where the mind flows, something to that extent. So just thinking of how helpful, that can be when you're starting to think in a positive manner. You can get incredible strides just from that. Also, I have a Pilates membership that I am a part of, and I can link, Lindy Well is the name of it, the details in the show notes, as well as the Disability Scoop. So you can read that article that I mentioned that talked about the journal studies that was conducted. So basically, overall, parents are the cornerstone of the household. And therefore, it is so important for us to take care of our minds and our bodies and our emotions in a way that is sustaining, so that we can be the caregivers that we want to be and show up in the ways that we want to, and to be able to care for our little ones as well as for ourselves in the very best way that we can. Because honestly, time goes by so fast. Thank you so much. I wish you peace and blessings on this day, and I look forward to speaking with you guys next time. Thank you so very much for listening in. If you have learned something new today, or have been blessed by this show in any way, please share it with a friend. And don't forget to head over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. And feel free to take a screenshot and tag me on Instagram, and I will tag you back. Thank you, and be well.